Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 312. Hope you had a good weekend. It's just getting worse and worse for the Democratic Party, folks. And going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast. I have a great podcast for you guys today. We've been exploring the physical and mental decline of President Joe Biden during his administration and going into the re-election campaign in 2024, and the cover-up. Jake Tapper's book is coming out tomorrow. They released the tapes from the interview that Joe Biden did with the special prosecutor, her, and everything that her reported about Joe Biden in his report, it was true. We've heard the tapes now. And it's a huge scandal. So all of that was going to be highlighting the news coverage this week, the Tapper book coming out tomorrow, and news about the revelations from these tapes of Joe Biden's interview with the special counsel. And then yesterday, as we're getting ready to go into this week where that's going to be the focus of the news coverage, it is announced that Joe Biden has a very aggressive form of prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones. Everyone who is in medicine, even Dr. Emmanuel, Rahm Emanuel's brother, has come out. Other oncologists have come out. Dr. Emmanuel is a oncologist as well. And they've said that, look, there's no way that Joe Biden hasn't had this cancer for years. He didn't just get cancer that is, spreading from his prostate into his bones. So he's likely had it for a while. It's my opinion, and I'm sorry, I'm extremely cynical about these people and anything they say. I don't trust anything they say. You're going to see why today, but I'm skeptical, and I think that they came out with the information about the diagnosis, so people don't go too hard on Joe Biden this week with the Tapper book coming out and the her tapes that were released last week. So I've been exploring that in my past few podcasts, and we've been focusing on the media and their role because they are the fifth estate, so to speak. They are the ones who are supposed to be the watchdog. Yes, the Biden administration and Biden campaign and his inner circle tried to cover it up, but the media's job is to not let them cover it up, not work with them to cover it up. The media's job is to get in there and find out what they're lying to us about and to assume that they're lying to you. So we were focusing on the media in the last podcast and their role, but today and starting today, we're probably going to get into this in the next podcast because I don't see that I'm going to get to everything today. And I have a lot to share with you. Today, we're going to start getting into the Democratic Party. What's going on with the Democratic Party? Why is the Democratic Party? So remember the premise that I laid out 3 podcasts ago and have reiterated in the past couple of podcasts, is that the mainstream legacy media has an agenda, and their agenda aligns with the agenda of the Democratic Party. But the agenda is the agenda of the corporate establishment. And Mussolini said that that fascism is the merger of state and corporate power, and that is the political establishment that shapes the agenda, and the media has the agenda of that corporate establishment, and so does the Democratic Party. And again, we looked at the media in the last couple of podcasts. Today, we're going to look at the Democratic Party and how they pursue that agenda, and how they fix elections to pursue that, to get people that are in power to pursue the election. And I'm going to explain what the cover up was about with covering up Joe Biden's cognitive and physical decline. And we know that the physical decline now goes beyond him just, can't walk and stampering along, can't ride a bike. Yeah, the guy has cancer, terminal cancer. So let's get started in today's podcast. And I want to start with this clip. This is a clip of Ro Khanna last week. Take a listen.
Congressman, it's always good to have you here. And I understand the inclination to say we're moving forward, we're putting this behind us. But you hear Chuck Todd there saying that there is sort of trust and credibility business that needs to be rebuilt among the party. Sir, here you are several times before the election saying that he was just fine. Watch this.
Biden seeking re-election?
Absolutely.
I've seen the president twice in the last 2 weeks. I've had a conversation with him. He's completely mentally sharp. When the president is out there, he's at his best. Have him debate in the general election. I don't think Donald Trump will. I have spoken.
I don't think Donald Trump will.
Fully coherent.
That's what they're saying. I don't think Donald Trump's going to debate. Joe Biden's ready to debate. Donald Trump's going to hide. Donald Trump's going to duck. He's not going to agree to debate.
On top of details, when I have talked to.
Were you telling the truth back then?
I was. I have met him a few times at public events, and he was. But, of course, I didn't have the full picture. I mean, I met him maybe 2 times on rope lines and at public events. And I do think it's important that, given what has come out, that we take accountability. Obviously, he should not have run. We should be clear to say that. Obviously, there should have been an open primary. And I don't think that's very difficult. Democrats should just be straight up that he should not have run. Now that we know all of the facts, he should not have run, and there should have been a primary, an open primary, is what Ro Khanna says. Okay, let's listen to Amy Klobuchar.
Senator, would the party have had a better chance of winning in 2024 had President Biden dropped out sooner?
You know, everything we look at in a rearview mirror after you lose an election, yes, we would have been served better by a primary. But
we should have had a primary. Yes, we would have been served better by having a primary, is what Amy Klobuchar says and what Ro Khanna says. Well, why wasn't there a primary? Why didn't the Democrats have a primary? And the reason why they didn't have a primary is because Biden couldn't win a primary. If they would have had an open primary, who would Biden have been running against? Well, he's been running against RFK for one, and who else? Marianne Williamson would have was in it. Bernie Sanders would have probably jumped in. He would have been running against all of these people if they would have had a primary. Now, the Democratic Party did have a facade of a primary. They had the elections but they announced in the beginning of the primary season, before even the Iowa caucuses, that we're not going to have any debates. We're not going to have any promoting of a primary by the Democratic Party. So they didn't have a primary. But the reason that they didn't have a primary is because Joe Biden couldn't win a primary, especially against Kennedy. Going back to the 1980s election, when Kennedy's uncle, Ted Kennedy, he primaried Jimmy Carter in 1980. And Jimmy Carter, to the day he died, said that beyond anything, the hostages in Iran, the gas and inflation crisis, beyond anything that he felt that he was dealing with in that 1980 election, Jimmy Carter said that the primary challenge from his left, from Ted Kennedy, is what hurt him the most. So Democrats, they understood that they're not going to have another Kennedy come in here and ruin our chances. And so they did not want to have a primary because Joe Biden couldn't win a primary in the state that he was in. So that's why they didn't have a primary. And there was one person who was saying that they should have a primary, and this guy was demonized. Let me tell you, folks, if the Democratic Party was smart, if the Democratic Party was smart right now, they would be begging this guy to be their nominee in 2028. This guy, Dean Phillips, is the only one with any integrity in that party. This guy is the only one who is not coming across like a phony, like Amy Klobuchar and like Ro Khanna and many others who are saying now we should have had a primary. This guy said back then that we're setting ourselves up for doom, that Joe Biden can't win. Joe Biden's going to lose. And they demonize this guy because it's a cult. We're dealing with a cult. And this guy, I'm like, again, if the Democrats were smart, they would be begging this guy to be their nominee because he's, again, the only one with any integrity. But his biggest problem and the reason that he can't be the Democratic nominee, folks, is because he is a rich, white, straight man. And this guy is, I don't even know why he's a Democrat, quite frankly, because they hate you, bro. They hate you. This guy would never, ever be the Democratic Party. And this is the problem with the Democratic Party, as you're going to see today, that this guy has more integrity in his pinky toe than anyone else in that party. And he's the only one who doesn't have the stench of filth on him right now, but he can't be the Democratic nominee. Not because of any policy or anything like that. It's because he's a rich, white, straight man. So I was telling you in the last podcast that what it was about was about getting Joe Biden over the finish line. And that's what they were trying to do. That's why they were hiding his cognitive decline, hiding his physical decline, hiding his cancer from us, is because they just wanted to get him over the finish line. And then after they got him over the finish line, by this time, Kamala Harris would have already been president. Because once they got him over the finish line, they would have invoked the 25th Amendment. He would have retired. So it was all about making this woman president. This woman president without the will of the voters. So she could be the first woman and first black woman president. That's what it was all about. Because that's all they care about. Again, that's why Dean Phillips can't be the nominee, because he's white and he's male. Doesn't matter anything about his policies or the fact that he's the only one with any integrity that can be highlighted at this point. He's white. And she's black and she's a woman. So that's what they wanted. That was the goal, to just get Biden, push him over the finish line. And then Kamala Harris was going to be president of the United States. So, I said that in the last podcast. And then, you may ask, well, if that was the case, if they wanted Kamala Harris just to be the first black woman president and they were using Biden for that, why wouldn't they invoke the 25th Amendment before the election, and then Kamala Harris become the president of the United States? She's the first. If they would have done this, they would have invoked, and they don't need Biden or his family to invoke the 25th Amendment. They could have done it with her and a few other members of the cabinet, and that's the way it works. Joe Biden's gone. So they could have done this before the election, and Kamala Harris would have been the first woman and the first black woman to be president of the United States. Yeah, hooray. She's the first. And then she would have been the nominee in November. Well, the reason they didn't do that is because they knew that Kamala Harris couldn't win. They knew she couldn't win. They knew it. That's why they were trying to get this guy over the finish line, and then they were going to get rid of him, and then she was going to be the first black woman president, but they knew she couldn't win. This is an article from a poll that came out in June of 2023. This is the summer before we get into the election year. Kamala Harris, least popular vice president in history. Half of Americans turned their backs on Joe Biden's deputy as she receives the lowest favorability ratings since polling began. They knew she couldn't win. So how'd she become the nominee? I mean, how did she even become, if she's that unpopular, how'd she even become Joe Biden's vice president? We're going to answer that question. This was a segment that Bill Clinton or Bill Maher did on his show. This was after the debates when Joe Biden is exposed last year, and everyone is, trying to. There's factions that are trying to force him out, and this is what Bill Maher says at the end of his shows in July. Take a listen.
Harris would be the first woman president, first black woman president, and first Asian president. But I don't vote for who will be the first. I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand.
Zero. She won 0 delegates in the 2020 primary. As a matter of fact, she dropped out of the race before the Iowa caucus because she was polling so low. She was polling in 6th place in California, her home state. The people that know her the best. She was in 6th place or 5th place. She was behind. She was behind Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and then I think she was 5th. She's polling in 5th place before she dropped out in her home state of California. Sure, her polling across the country were terrible in 2020. She didn't win a single delegate because she dropped out before the Iowa caucuses, so she wouldn't have to suffer the defeat in Iowa and in all those primaries. He's absolutely right here, though. She's completely unpopular.
I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular.
Never.
You can count the number of delegates
completely
she won
unpopular
in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers. In 3 years as vice president, she's been quieter than an electric car. And like an electric car, your MAGA uncle can't explain why she fills him with homicidal rage. She just does. Sometimes life isn't fair. It's not fair that she's not popular. She's intelligent and accomplished, and in fact was put in charge of the border. And look at how... Okay, bad example.
So everyone knows that she was unpopular. Everyone knows that she was unpopular, and then they knew she couldn't win. So that's why they were trying to get this guy over the finish line. And we're going to be quiet about his cognitive and physical decline because we just need to get him over the finish line. Then once we get him over the finish line, then this imbecile becomes president of the United States. That was the game. And they were trying to get it done. So, again, let's talk about 2020 and go back and ask the question, how did Kamala Harris even become Joe Biden's running mate? How did she become his VP? And quite frankly, as we're going back to 2020, we're going to talk about how Joe Biden even became the nominee. That question has to be asked in highlighting what goes on in the Democratic Party, how the Democratic Party operates. But this was the debate in 2020 when Kamala Harris calls out Joe Biden for being a racist. Take a listen.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
She's talking about Joe Biden's friend, Storm Thurmond, and Joe Biden's friend, Robert Byrd. That's what she's calling him out. She's calling him out in the debate in 2020 about his friendship with Storm Thurmond. He loved him some Storm Thurmond and Robert Byrd, who he eulogized. Both members of the KKK. And that's what she's calling him out for.
Reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the 2nd class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
That little girl was me. And then Kamala Harris started selling these shirts during the campaign with this picture of her when she was a little girl. I mean, she was a little girl in Oakland, I think. And she was only in Oakland for a little while before they moved to Canada. I don't even know if what she said was true, but these were the shirts she was selling. That little girl was me. That little girl was me, you know? So, Kamala Harris is calling out Joe Biden, and it really did wound Joe Biden, asking the question about how Joe Biden became the nominee that year. And before we get into that that question of how Joe Biden became the nominee that year, and then how Kamala Harris became his vice president after this contentious confrontation that they have where she calls him a racist and then is campaigning on the fact that that little girl was mean in the primary. I mean, it's pretty contentious. And so before we get there, I want to talk about this group. And we're going to talk about this group today, and then we're going to get further into this group and the leaders we deserve in the next podcast, and talk about David Hogg, because David Hogg was the vice chair, a new vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, and they just ousted him as the vice chair because this guy is, through this PAC, Leaders We Deserve, is trying to raise up to $20 million to primary Democrats in safe Democrat seats. And I'm going to explain in the next podcast where he got the idea from, where he's going wrong, or where he was going wrong when he was part of the DNC establishment. Can't do this and be vice chair of the DNC. And now that they've ousted him, that actually frees him up and this group up to go and primary Democrats. They're talking about doing it in safe Democrat districts where there's not a chance. And doing things safe is not how to get things done. But at least these guys know that there needs to be some type of shakeup in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party cannot keep functioning the way that the Democratic Party is functioning. And again, I'm going to talk more about David Hogg and this group, Leaders We Deserve, in the next podcast, and what they're trying to do, and the roadblocks that they are going to face and are already facing. Again, they ousted him from his position as vice chair. David Hogg was on the Bill Maher show last week. I want you to take a listen to what he says.
I'm reading your name all the time in the paper. There's so much controversy around you. What is the controversy? What you must have hit a nerve somewhere. What's going on there with you and the DNC?
Well, look, I'm not here to defend the indefensible. The fact of the matter is, last election cycle, we lost vote share with every single demographic, except predominantly the older people and people with PhDs. That is a major problem. We have an issue here that goes way beyond our messaging. If this was just a messaging problem, we spent $2 billion last election cycle, and we still got the result that we had.
Listen to what he says, because that's been the narrative, is that that it's a messaging problem. We had to figure out how to get our message out, and that people aren't getting our message on legacy media. They're going out and they're getting a new message from podcasts and TikToks. It's all about the messaging, is what the narrative is. David Hogg says, no, it's not about the messaging.
We have an issue here that goes way beyond our messaging. If this was just a messaging problem, we spent $2 billion last election cycle, and we still got the result that we had. This is a messenger problem. And what I'm trying to do here is say, all right, we're going to light a fire under Democrats' asses to make sure that we are here to meet the moment that our country is in and show people how we are not just the party that is against Donald Trump, but we're a party that is here to provide an alternative vision for the future of this country.
So messenger problem is what he says. We don't have a messaging problem, but a messenger problem. And then I want you to hear what he says right here. Take a listen.
Acknowledge the fact, too, that the reason why I ended up in Parkland in the first place, where the shooting happened, obviously, is because of California's housing crisis. That wasn't because of Republican leadership that created that. And it's still a major crisis today because my father we couldn't afford to pay our mortgage anymore had he medically retired in California. That's how we ended up in Florida in the first place. So what I'm trying to do with this initiative, with Leaders We Deserve, the organization that we're working with, is to challenge Democrats that we feel like are failing to meet the moment in safe congressional seats that don't risk us losing the House, and say to them, look, nobody is entitled to their position of power, because ultimately the positions of power in this country don't belong to any member of Congress that is out there. They belong to the people that vote them into office. And the people are showing us right now with our record low approval ratings that they're not happy with us. And what I'm trying to do here is show that we're trying to bring in a new generation.
So why is the establishment mad at you? This sounds like basic Democratic stuff. I mean, James Carville called you a contemptible little twerp.
Well, then he
James Carville is from the Clinton administration. Helped get Clinton elected. The guy's almost 90 years old. So there's getting ready to be a civil war in the Democratic Party, just to let you know. And I'm here for it. I cannot wait to see what happens. And it's this, there's going to be a civil war between the old guard and these young progressives, and they're challenging the people like James Carville from the Clinton administration, who's almost 90 years old, and James Clyburn as well. This is something he says as a shot across the bow at James Clyburn in this interview with Bill Maher. Take a listen.
Basic Democratic stuff. I mean, James Carville called you a contemptible little twerp.
Well, then he flipped as well. And he came around and he said, actually, the DNC should not remove David.
And you're not a twerp.
Exactly. Well, it's because...
And they did remove him.
It's because... I think part of it, though, is because we have become very uncomfortable with having conversations with people who don't agree with us. And you know why I was able to reach that agreement with Bill? It's because, James, it's because I talked to him. We debated each other and we stood our ground and we agreed, look, we have our differences, but ultimately we all want to do the same thing here, which is get back to winning majorities and delivering for the American people. And that's what he saw there. And part of what happens in politics is people want to do two things at the same time that are incompatible. They want to keep the same people in the positions of power that they're in that are individually beneficial to them, and they want to get back to winning. But we're not going to be able to do that with the same cast of characters that got us here. And the answer to that is to use democracy within our own party to give voters the option of voting for somebody new so that they at least have the option.
Right, so you want to get rid of the dead wood.
Effectively, yes, but it's not just a matter of age, to be clear. Unfortunately, Bill, as you know, there are young people who suck just as much as there are older people who suck as well.
So it does come down to age. The difference, he's saying it doesn't come down to age is because that's what people are accusing him of doing, is that he wants to go out and primary some of these career Democrats who have held their seats for 30, 40 years and are in safe districts, and he wants to go and challenge them to get some new blood in the Democratic Party. That's his whole plan. So he says something in this which is, it becomes a shot at James Clyburn of South Carolina, who is one of those career politicians who's held his seat for, I don't know, James Clyburn's been in Congress at least 30 years. And then James Clyburn, he is on the Roland Martin show, and he and David Hogg have a back and forth on X, going at each other. And then I want you to listen to this question that Roland Martin asked James Clyburn, and then we're going to get back into the question of how Joe Biden became the Democratic nominee in 2020, and then how Kamala Harris became the vice president. Listen to this question, and then let's listen to Clyburn's answer.
And this is sort of strange to me. They blame you for President Joe Biden because your endorsement was hugely important for him in South Carolina. But I got to remind people, he didn't win all the delegates required to be president in South Carolina. There were other primaries for the people who supported Bernie Sanders. I keep saying, hey, if Bernie was the choice, voters in other states could have chose him. So, what do you make of the folk who are constantly complaining that you're the problem for helping Joe Biden when, listen, there were a lot of people who ran in 2020, and hell, if the progressive voters wanted somebody else, they could have picked somebody else.
So the question itself that Roland Martin poses is completely dishonest. He says that there were a lot of candidates that ran in 2020 on this stage, when Kamala Harris is challenging Joe Biden, there's a lot of people on the stage with them in this debate before the primary started. But during the South Carolina primary, a lot of those people dropped out right before that primary. Why? Because Barack Obama, because this guy lost the first two primaries, Joe Biden. He lost the Iowa caucuses and then he lost to New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders won both of those primaries. He won one and came in second in the other. Bernie Sanders was well on his way to being the Democratic nominee if everybody would have stayed in the race. Is the reason that works that way is because everybody stays in the race. It spreads out the vote to these different candidates. And then Bernie Sanders, because he has a loyal base of support, then he has enough support to push him over the top in Iowa, push him over the top in New Hampshire. And that was going to be the case in South Carolina as well. But what happened was Barack Hussein Obama gets on the phone with Amy Klobuchar and convinces Amy Klobuchar to drop out of the race. And then he gets on the phone with Pete Buttigieg and makes a deal with Pete Buttigieg to drop out of the race as well. The deal that Pete Buttigieg made, that's how Pete Buttigieg gets his cabinet position. Because the deal was drop out and you get a cabinet position. You're young is what Obama told him. You'll get a cabinet position and then you can run in the future. So that was the deal. So these Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and others drop out before South Carolina because this guy had already lost the first two primaries. See, what Roland Martin is saying here is that other people had a chance to vote because when Joe Biden wins South Carolina, then that gives him the backing to stay in the race. If Joe Biden loses Iowa and loses New Hampshire and loses South Carolina, Joe Biden, his money is going to dry up. There's going to be a push for Joe Biden to get out because he's already lost the first three primaries. So when James Clownburn endorses Joe Biden in South Carolina and then gets all of the black voters in South Carolina to support Joe Biden, along with Barack Hussein Obama getting on the phone, getting Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and others to drop out. That is how they saved Joe Biden in South Carolina so he doesn't lose three primaries in a row. So that way he can stay in the race. And then that is what propelled him. It was only came out down to only Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren, I think, stayed in until the end at that point. But all those people dropped out of the race, Roland, and they dropped out of the race because Obama convinced them to drop out. Then Clownburn endorses him in South Carolina, ends up winning South Carolina, and he has new life is the way that worked. If he loses South Carolina, that's three primaries in a row, Joe Biden's gone. So this is a very dishonest question on its face that Roland is asking, but let's listen to Clownburn's answer.
For him in South Carolina. But I got to remind people, he didn't win all the delegates required to be president in South Carolina. There were other primaries for the people who supported Bernie Sanders. I keep saying, hey, if Bernie was the choice, voters in other states could have chose him. So, what do you make of the folk who are constantly complaining that that you're the problem for helping Joe Biden when, listen, there were a lot of people who ran in 2020, and hell,
then they all dropped out before South Carolina.
If voters wanted somebody else, they could have picked somebody else.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting to me because anybody who want to blame me for Joe Biden, I accept that. I'm very proud of that.
I'm very proud.
I do believe that if you look at Joe Biden's record, on substance, he comes as good as they get. Second to Lyndon Baines Johnson in production.
So he's as good as it gets. I'm proud of of helping Joe Biden to become president of the United States. He's as good as Lyndon Baines Johnson, is what James Clownburn said. So that's how Joe Biden becomes the nominees, because everybody drops out before South Carolina. That breathes new life into Joe Biden, and without everybody else in the race. Kamala Harris had dropped out. Everybody else had dropped out. So it was just Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And then he has enough delegates in the remaining states to defeat Bernie Sanders. So that's how he becomes the nominee. But during the primary process and during the debates, Joe Biden makes a commitment in that primary, and he commits to, if he is the nominee, if he becomes the nominee, that he will pick a female running mate. He commits to that. And I don't know why he commits to that and why he thought that was necessary, because I guess I do know why. It's because that's what's important to them. I mean, who cares if you're going to run with a woman running mate? You guys don't even know what a woman is. You can't even tell me what a woman is. But it's so important that he runs with a woman, that he makes that commitment before he even wins the nomination. If I'm the nominee, I promise that I'm going to pick a woman. He says the same thing about Supreme Court, that when Kennedy resigns, I promise to replace him with the black woman. He specifies a black woman, I think, with the Supreme Court justice. And this is what the Democratic Party cares about. This is why Dean Phillips would never ever be the nominee, and no other white, straight, rich man will be the Democratic nominee at all, because this is a huge problem with them. So he commits to the first female vice president, that he will run with the female vice president. He didn't say a black woman, he didn't say a white woman, he didn't say an Asian woman, he just said a woman, whatever that is. They don't even know what that is, but whatever that is, I promise that my vice president, my running mate, will be a woman. So after he wins the nomination, the black voters, the black, political establishment, black commentators on TV like Joy Reid and everybody else, they start putting pressure on Joe Biden to pick a black woman. Not only has to be a woman, which you've already committed to, it has to be a black woman. Now, Kamala Harris, what does she bring to the table for Joe Biden as a running mate? If he's going to be running against Donald Trump in 2020, and he knows it's going to be a tough race. What states does she help him get? California? There's no chance of Trump winning California. What does she bring to the table? She's completely unpopular. She had to drop out of the primary before the Iowa caucuses because she was so popular and polling so low. What does she bring to the table? You think Joe Biden wanted to run with her? No, he didn't want to run with her. Joe Biden wanted to run with Gretchen Whitmer. That's who he was vetting. And that made a lot of sense because Michigan's an important swing state. I know what Gretchen Whitmer brings to the table. She can help bring Michigan. That's important. And Joe Biden was vetting and meeting with Gretchen Whitmer. He was on the verge of announcing that he was going to be running with Gretchen Whitmer and the black activist. He better pick a black woman. Biden faces Whitmer backlash. African-American activists and operatives say Biden would pay a steep price if he chooses a white woman for the ticket. Let me read that again. African-American activists and operatives say Biden would pay a steep price if he chooses a white woman for the ticket. And he had already committed to a woman. Why does it have to be a black woman? This is what's going on in the Democratic Party. This is a huge problem in the Democratic Party that I'm going to highlight in this podcast and in the next podcast. So that's how Kamala Harris, Joe Biden was, so what actually happened, let me tell you what actually happened. What happened was he was vetting and he was going to ignore these people that were trying to force him to pick a black woman. But then he goes on the Breakfast Club show and does the interview with Charlemagne the God. And in that interview, Biden famously says, if you're having trouble figuring out if you're for me or if you're for Trump, then you ain't black. That's what Biden said to Charlemagne, is that if you're having trouble figuring out if you're for me or if you're for Trump, then you ain't black. And then when Joe Biden said that, then all of these black activists, they used that. And they said, that is so offensive that Biden would say that, that all black people think alike and that we're all a monolith is what they said. And they feigned like they were upset. So they were going to use it to pressure him into picking a black woman. And that is exactly what they did. And there were a couple of black women that he was looking at, but this was the establishment candidate right here. This was the one that they heaped on him. And that's how Kamala Harris became his vice president. And then now, after he didn't make it over the finish line and he was exposed in the debate, and then she had to be the nominee, even though they knew that she couldn't win. They knew she couldn't win. Now he and many others are coming out and saying that she did not become president because she's a woman and the country was misogynist and because she's a black woman and the country's racist. Had nothing to do with her. She was unpopular in the Democrat primary in 2020. Were those people racist and misogynist? She was polling in 5th place in her home state of California. Were all the people in California Democrats racist and misogynistic? No, she's been unpopular her entire political career, unless she runs up in San Francisco. And I mean, and here in California, I mean, I guess, she won the seat as DA, but I mean, don't even get me started with California politics. But nationally, they knew she was not popular. They knew she couldn't win. It didn't have anything to do with her being with the country being misogynistic or not wanting a woman and her being black. It's because she was not popular and she's never been popular nationally. This segment happened on The View last week, and they bring this up. They start talking about not only Kamala Harris, but also Hillary Clinton, and saying that the country doesn't want a woman because Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were both so qualified, and the country rejected both of them. I want you to listen to a little bit of this segment.
It is this fear that the people within the party, within the primary system, will have about voting for a woman, because every time we voted for a woman, we've lost so far. And I think that that's a natural fear because we just want to win. So there's a lot of people that are like, you know what? Like, let's go find the safest white boy we can find. When we talk about them, I can tell you that there is one specific candidate. I had a donor on the phones with me telling me that all the donors are lining up behind that candidate.
Oh, I think it's J.B. Pritzker, but I could be wrong. Pritzker? He's Illinois governor. He's a billionaire. He's Midwest. He's got the profile. Wouldn't be a controversial.
I'm Governor Westmore all the way.
Westmore.
So she says, this is Sarah. She says, I'm Governor Westmore all the way. And then watch what she says, why she's Governor Westmore all the way.
Very good idea.
And if you don't know who he is, you should learn, because to me, he's the most qualified, amazing candidate I've seen in my lifetime.
The most qualified, amazing candidate that she has seen in her lifetime. Governor Westmore is what she says. What has Governor Westmore done? What makes Governor Westmore the most amazing candidate that she's seen in her lifetime? This is crazy. These Democrats are crazy. They're fixated on identity, and it is destroying them. It is corrosive to their party.
The way.
Westmore is a very good idea.
And if you don't know who he is, you should learn, because to me, he's the most qualified, amazing candidate I've seen in my lifetime.
So you agree?
He will be president.
So you agree with Crockett then?
He's black.
That you can't have a woman.
He's black, is what she says. What, is that the only thing you know about him? That's the only thing? Is that what makes him the most amazing candidate? Is because he's black, Sarah? And it's funny because when she says that he's black, you hear Alyssa bust out laughing because it's just so idiotic. That's the first thing that you'll say about this guy. He's the most amazing candidate that I have ever seen in my lifetime. He's black.
Wes Moore's very good idea.
And if you don't know who he is, you should learn, because to me, he's the most qualified, amazing candidate I've seen in my lifetime.
So
he will be president.
So you agree with Crockett then?
He's black.
That you can't have a woman.
You can't have a woman.
It's about a woman.
Well, but the thing is that I don't look at people first by the woman, a black man, a gay person, of this. I look at the best candidate, and then they happen to have all these other things they bring.
Yeah, but the first thing that you said about him was that he's black. What do you mean you don't look at all those other things? I mean, you didn't name anything else about the most amazing candidate that you've seen in your lifetime. The only thing the only characteristic that you named about him is that he's black. You understand what I'm saying, people? These people have a sickness.
I look at the best candidate, and then they happen to have all these other things they bring.
You may be a little different from most of the country.
Most of front.
I don't know.
Right.
I would say
so now they're going to get into Hillary Clinton, and what Sonny says about Hillary Clinton is astonishing. And I'm going to show you the relationship between Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, because it's not that people don't want to vote for a woman, people. It's not that a woman cannot be elected president. It's that the Democratic Party tried to force two of the most unpopular women in American history on the American people. Two of the most unpopular. The only person who would be more unpopular than Kamala Harris would be Hillary Clinton.
We got to stop telling the American public what they're ready for.
Yeah, and we've elected a black man before. We lost twice when women ran.
Yeah.
I mean,
but is there no distinguishing factors to each woman and why they might have lost? Is there no nuance?
Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified candidate in presidential.
Listen to the crowd. They all applaud. Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified candidates in American history. Where would you get that from, Sonny? That Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified candidates in American history. Well, you would get that from Barack Hussein Obama, because Barack Hussein Obama said that about Hillary Clinton in the 2016 DNC speech that he gave when she was nominated in 2016. This is what he says.
That's the Hillary I've come to admire. And that's why I can say with confidence, there has never been a man or a woman, not me, not Bill, nobody, more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as president of the United States of America.
That Barack Hussein Obama says not him, not Bill. There's never been anyone more qualified to be president of the United States than Hillary Clinton. That's where she gets this from. That's what she's saying, is that Hillary Clinton was the most qualified candidate in American history, and the American people couldn't vote for her. It obviously has to be misogyny. It obviously has to be that Americans don't want to vote for a woman.
Is there no distinguishing factors to each woman and why they might have lost? Is there no nuance?
Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified candidate in presidential.
She carried a lot of Clinton baggage, but she was polarizing.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm fine because
she was polarizing, is what Alyssa says, that she's the most qualified candidate. No, I mean, even if you believe that to be true, that she was one of the most qualified candidates, I mean, her unpopulars were so high. There were so many people that had disdain for Hillary Clinton because of her husband. Sonny, they even said here, let's listen to the rest of this.
It's game show host.
Yes.
Okay?
I loved her. I voted for her. But the number one thing I heard from people that didn't like her was there was this mystery around the Clinton baggage they took. I just don't trust her.
They weaponized her husband against Hillary Clinton. And
they weaponized her husband against her. That people associated Hillary Clinton with Bill Clinton. Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you associate Hillary Clinton with Bill Clinton? Absolutely. And it's funny because Barack Obama in 2016 saying that she's the most qualified candidate to ever run, more qualified than me and more qualified than Bill. Barack Obama was not saying that when he ran against Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary. People act like 2016 was the first presidential run for Hillary Clinton. And then she ran for president and lost. No, she ran for president and lost the primary in 2008. Why did she lose the primary in 2008 to this one-term black senator who was wet behind the ears that nobody knew anything about, but he comes out of nowhere and beats a former first lady in the primary? Why did Democrats in 2008, in the 2008 primary, choose this guy over Hillary Clinton? If she's the most qualified, more qualified than you, if she's more qualified than you, then why didn't she win the nomination in 2008, Barack Obama? And all of this stuff that he's saying in the 2016 DNC about her being the most qualified candidate for president, he did not say that. He said the absolute opposite about that when he ran against her in 2008. He said she was unqualified because of her not only vote for the Iraq war, she stood on the Senate floor and she promoted the Iraq war. He tied Hillary Clinton back to all of the disastrous policies that I've been telling you about from the Clinton administration. When Obama was running in 2008 in that primary, we were in the middle of a financial crisis, a crash that Obama said that Bill Clinton caused with his deregulation. Obama tied Hillary Clinton back to everything that Bill Clinton had done. That's how he won the nomination that year. And it had nothing to do with the Democrats not wanting a woman president. If anybody wants a woman president, it's Democrats. But why did they reject her in 2008? It wasn't because she's a woman. It's because she was unpopular. It's because the country, it's not that the country won't elect a woman as president. It's that the Democratic Party keeps nominating the most unpopular women that they could. Looking for the most unpopular. Who is the most unpopular woman that we can find to run for president? Oh, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. That's why you haven't had a woman president. Not only did Hillary Clinton get tied to the baggage of Clinton and Clinton bring down his wife's run for president, Bill Clinton brought down his vice president's run for president. Al Gore, when he ran in 2000, he was tied to the baggage of the Clinton administration. Now, I believe that Al Gore actually really won the 2000 election, and I have a plan to do a future podcast about the 2000 election. But Al Gore was challenged from the left by Ralph Nader. I've talked about this before. Ralph Nader ran in 2000 and challenged from the Green Party from the left. And there was an opening for Al Gore from the left because Ralph Nader, if you listen to what he says, and when we do the podcast about the 2000 election, I'm going to play clips of Ralph Nader, and you're going to hear what he says about the corporations and the fat cats and the fact that Clinton had merged the government with the corporations, and all the opening that was on Al Gore's left when Ralph Nader was running was left there because of the baggage of Bill Clinton. And of course, that baggage would transfer over to his wife when she runs for president. Ralph Nader says here, Nader appeared on the ballot in 43 states and D.C. And that's because both parties, the Democrat and the Republican Party, were working against him. They wouldn't let him debate. They were trying to keep him off of the ballots in many of the other states, but 43 out of 50, that's not bad. Up from 22 in 1996. So in 1996, just 4 years before that, the Green Party was only on the ballots in 22 states. And then during Nader's run, they got it up to 43. He received almost 3 million votes, 2.74. And again, people speculate that Gore lost because of Nader. He did not lose because of Nader, but Nader absolutely hurt him. And again, I believe that Gore won, but Gore, when he ran in 2000, he was running on "I'm my own man. Don't tie me to this guy." That was his saying, is that I'm my own man, that I don't want to be tied to Bill Clinton. That was what he was running on, because he understood the baggage of Bill Clinton. And of course, if Al Gore would understand that baggage, and that baggage would weigh down Al Gore, why would that baggage not weigh down Hillary Clinton in 2008 when Obama was running against her, and in 2016 when she runs again? No, you guys just nominated. It's not even that you nominated. It was forced upon you. It was forced upon you. Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton were forced upon Democrat voters. In the 2016 election, all the energy was behind Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders won Michigan. He was winning all these primaries, but because of the super delegates, Hillary Clinton was racking up more delegates in every primary, even primaries that Bernie Sanders, won. But all the energy was around him. He had all the big rallies and everything. And if the Democratic Party, the DNC, wasn't putting their finger on the scale, it is very likely that Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee that year. Now, Bernie Sanders, I think, is an absolute con man. So funny that they asked him last week. He's going around the country now, again, with all the energy in the Democratic Party right now is at these Bernie Sanders fight the oligarchy tours that he's doing with AOC. But this goes back 25 years to Nader. This energy, this progressive energy that is to the left of the Democratic Party, even goes back to Ralph Nader. But Bernie Sanders didn't have nearly the amount of integrity that Ralph Nader had. They asked him last week about him flying to all these fight the oligarchy tours on a private plane. He's fighting private. And he said, I have to fly private. I'm going to get to all these events if I don't fly private. And people were saying, it takes you back to the Animal Farm quote in George Orwell's Animal Farm, that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Because Bernie Sanders is a socialist, self-admitted socialist. And the Democratic establishment, first of all, they didn't think that the country would vote for a socialist, so they did not want Bernie Sanders to be the Democratic nominee and then have Trump run against socialism. But on the off chance that Bernie Sanders would win, they definitely don't want the policies that a socialist would implement. So that's why they blocked Bernie Sanders from winning the nomination in 2016, because just like Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary, Bernie Sanders, if everything would have been fair and square, and they weren't putting their finger on the scale. And they absolutely were putting their finger on the scale. That's what the WikiLeaks showed us in 2016, just before the Democratic National Convention that year, is that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the chair of the party, was putting her finger on the scale for Hillary Clinton. She was working to make Hillary Clinton the nominee and working against Bernie Sanders. And that's what the Democratic Party does. I mean, that's modus operandi for the Democratic Party. So, and that's why W. Wasserman Schultz had to step down from being the chair right before the convention starts. And you remember what happens in that convention? There's all kinds of chaos because Bernie Sanders delegates are pissed. But he calms everything down. That's why I say he's a con man, because instead of being pissed off and saying there's no way that I'm going to support this con artist, Hillary Clinton, he endorses her and tries and gets his endorsement. We all got to come together. We all got to come together because Donald Trump is such an existential threat that despite the fact that the DNC is disenfranchising you people, and despite the fact that they're using my Jewish heritage, trying to use my Jewish heritage against me in this campaign, I'm going to endorse her. And I want all of you guys to come along and vote for her as well. But this goes back. This goes back pretty far. But there's some memes that have been coming out about Bernie Sanders now, because he's got to fly private to fight the oligarchy. Got to fly private to fight the oligarchy. United States of America is increasingly becoming an oligarchy. And this is my favorite. This one went viral, of him and AOC on the private plane with lobster and champagne. Fight the oligarchy. God, man. I was hoping that I would get into more of this in this podcast, but it looks like I don't have very much more time. What is the last clip that I'll play? And then we'll get back into this on Friday. I want you to listen to this young lady who was a delegate in the DNC in 2024. And I want you to listen to what she says, and she'll be the last clip we play. And again, we'll get back into this on Friday.
Hey guys, okay, so I wanted to share with you guys a really quick memento story. It's not really a memento, it's not really a story, but I wanted to give my thoughts about this book that came out. It's called Fight. And it tries to tell a story about what happened during the 2024 election. Now, I was a delegate at the 2024 National Convention, and basically, I think it's important for me to speak because I do not want history to be rewritten. I think this is a very important time that we're living through. And a time that we are realizing as a nation, as a national consciousness, that there is a problem with democracy in this country, and there's definitely a problem with presidential primaries, particularly in the Democratic Party and the way that it's run.
Particularly in the Democratic Party. And I think that's very important because the Republican Party didn't want Trump to be the nominee in 2016 when he won. Do you know that if Trump wouldn't have won in 2016, do you know who the two nominees would have been? Most likely, if Trump would not have run in 2016, who would have been the two candidates running against each other? It would have been Jeb Bush, and Hillary Clinton. That's who they were trying to run on you. They're going to try to run Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush in 2016, and most likely Jeb Bush would have won the nomination in 2016 if Trump wouldn't have won, and he would have been running against Hillary Clinton. That's the fix. The fix is in. Doesn't matter. The corporate establishment is like, yeah, we can't lose. We get Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush. But those are going to be the candidates in 2016 if Donald Trump wouldn't have won. And the Republican establishment, like the Democratic establishment, did not want Trump to be the nominee. Trump broke through. And unlike Bernie Sanders, if they would have tried to cheat Trump wouldn't have played ball like Bernie Sanders. I promise you that. So this is a problem that is a party that is unique to the Democratic Party, I believe. This is a problem for the Democrats.
Basically, I think it's important for me to speak because I do not want history to be rewritten. I think this is a very important time that we're living through. And a time that we are realizing as a nation, as a national consciousness, that there is a problem with democracy in this country, and there's definitely a problem with presidential primaries, particularly in the Democratic Party and the way that it's run. So the problem with the book, Fight, is that they tried to say that they wanted an open convention. The Democratic ruling elites did not want an open convention. Okay, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, whoever is in the top one.
So what they're talking about and what this book Fight talks about, we're going to get into this in the next podcast, that after Joe Biden was exposed and he had to drop out, when he dropped out, there are people that wanted a open convention. They wanted a ability for the delegates, and she was a delegate, to choose who their nominee was going to be because Biden had dropped out. They didn't just want it handed to Kamala Harris the way everything had been handed to her. They wanted to have a vigorous fight there at the convention and come out with the strongest candidate. There were people that were saying that is what we should do. So we started the podcast with Amy Klobuchar and Ro Khanna saying that we should have had a primary before Joe Biden even became the nominee or the presumptive nominee. We should have had a open primary, but we didn't do that. The reason why they didn't do that is because they knew that Joe Biden couldn't win the primary and they didn't want Kennedy to harm him. But then once Joe Biden is exposed in the debate with Donald Trump and he drops out, then there were factions in the Democratic Party, very powerful. You're going to see who these people were in the next podcast that say, look, Kamala can't win. We know she can't win. That we want to have a open convention or a open primary process where we choose our candidate because we know that this woman cannot win. She's completely unpopular, our most unpopular vice president since we've been polling. She didn't win any delegates and had to drop out of the primary in 2020. People do not like her. We know she cannot win. We want to have an open process. And there are people that wanted that. And I'm going to tell you in the next podcast why that couldn't happen.
There is a problem with democracy in this country, and there's definitely a problem with presidential primaries, particularly in the Democratic Party and the way that it's run. So the problem with the book, Fight, is that they tried to say that they wanted an open convention. The Democratic ruling elites did not want an open convention. Okay, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, whoever is in the top 1 to 5% of the Democratic Party, the ruling elites, they did not want somebody who was an independent thinker. They were afraid of their delegates. They were afraid to let people like me vote for the leader of the free world, and which is why they forced us to try to vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, so yes, you did get forced. Kamala Harris was forced on you. She was. And there were some that did want the open convention and the primary process. But I'm going to tell you who forced Kamala Harris on you people and who wanted the open primary. I'll talk about all of that in the next podcast. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.